This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 4th November 2025 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The minutes are hereby confirmed. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 25th November 2025 to be deferred. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
Question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from His Excellency the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business.
Government Business is the order of the day.
Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill 2025.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, if there's one thing that I believe we could fairly safely say about the tenure of Barbados Labour Party governments in this country, it has been that we have dug deep and found ways to use this chamber to truly pass laws for the peace, order, and good government of the country, to truly pass laws to reform the lives of our citizenry, to truly pass laws that reflect a deep sense of humanity. We can go as far back as the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, which is one of the things that is most commonly cited. But across generations, there have been so many. There's been the medical termination of pregnancy. We've had the Education Act. We have really used our successive tenures in Parliament to reform this country. In 1997, Mr. Speaker, a Barbados Labour Party administration recognized that it was important to give individuals who had run afoul of the law a second chance. And in 1997, we therefore enacted a piece of legislation called the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. That act came into force in March of that year. And from then until now, it has afforded the opportunity of a large number of Barbadian men and women who have received convictions to put themselves right, sir, once they've met certain criteria laid out in the law. But if you look at the legislation that we passed in 1997, you would see that there was a timidity that was present because we were introducing a new concept to Barbados. There are generations of Barbadians who still follow I think I would leave it to the member for Christchurch South to correct me, or the Parliament's chaplain, but I think that you refer to those, what they call an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth as being of the Old Testament, which had a certain rigidity about punishment, because in those days you could be taken to the gates of the city and be stoned to death for things that today we wouldn't even trouble ourselves with. There was a severity associated with running afoul of the law. And even though in '97 we were willing to strike into a new area, there was still a timidity because you could only get your record expunged if it was your first offense. And I think, Mr. Speaker, you would be able to I don't want to say testify, you'd be able to attest from your vast experience in the criminal field that a number of individuals come to that place where they say, I need to rehabilitate myself, only after committing several offenses. Very rarely would it be a person who has served a single offense. And certainly when I look at the records of the office of the department that deals with expungement of criminal records in my ministry, the vast majority of the individuals have had more than one offense. Many of them have been minor, but it is almost characteristic that there are multiple offenses that are committed before they reach the place where they say, I need to clean up my act. And so because the act as it was passed in 1997 said only on the first offense, it meant, Mr. Speaker, that a huge raft of individuals were left out of the opportunity to have their criminal record expunged. And therefore, in 1999, we went back to Parliament and we extended the rehabilitation periods, and we permitted for the first time individuals who have had multiple offenses to get the benefit of the record of having their criminal record expunged. The current position, Mr. Speaker, is that rehabilitation is presumed so long as you have so long as a certain minimum period passes between your last conviction and the period and the point where you make the application to the court. And our act as it stands doesn't stipulate offenses, it only stipulates the penalties that are provided for. And therefore, as it stands today, if you commit an offense, doesn't matter what offense it is, if you commit an offense and a custodial sentence is not imposed, as long as you keep your proverbial nose clean for a year, you can apply and have your record expunged. That's if there's no custodial sentence. So regardless of the offense, as long as you don't serve a day in prison, a year passes, you can apply for an expungement. If you are in prison for a period less than a year, the rehabilitation period is 3 years. So if you are in prison for a year and under, whether High Court, whether Magistrates Court, as long as you've served your sentence and then a further 3 years passes and you have not run afoul of the law, then again you are eligible to have your record expunged. And it goes up in stages. So a person who is in prison now, who serves a term of imprisonment of between 1 to 3 years, at the end of serving your term of imprisonment, the rehabilitation period is 5 years. So you go for 5 years without getting into problems with the police, you can get your record expunged. And then a person in prison for between 3 to 7 years, you must have a rehabilitation period of 10 years after you have served your sentence. And then you can get your record expunged. And that has served us well, Mr. Speaker. But the challenge with having rigid time periods is that you don't get the benefit of a sort of equity operating. So an individual who has served 8 years under the laws as it exists, no matter how rehabilitated they be, no matter that they may be volunteering for every charity, living the life that is perhaps more righteous than many who have never gone to prison, it is impossible for you to have your record expunged. Impossible. Mr. Speaker, if there was ever a testimony, it is one that I seek your leave to refer to, sir. And I'm happy to make it a document to the House, but because it would be wrong for me to identify the writer, I would need to do so having redacted the individual's names and other information that might help to identify them. But this letter was addressed to me in July of this year. And it says, "Dear sir," my name is, and of course I'm not going to read the name. She says she's 46 years old and a single parent. She also takes care of her grandmother who raised her from when she was a baby. At the age of 36, she got into trouble with the law for certain fraudulent offenses. She was arrested and charged in, well, I won't say the year, and sent to Her Majesty's Prison Dodds Female Section on remand. She spent 2 years on remand. Eventually, sir, she was sentenced to 5 years plus in prison. Mr. Speaker, thank you. This lady was released. While she was in prison, she says she spent her time wisely, gained 2 CXCs, all of which she learned herself. She was self-taught. She did the exams in prison, got back English A at grade 2, social studies at grade 3. She worked as an orderly while in prison. She was released, and upon her release date, sir, she came out of prison and has been struggling since then, but she then went to the Samuel Jackman Institute of Technology to study auxiliary nursing. She had a benefactor who paid for her books, her uniform, and her fees. She says she passed with flying colors. She passed the medical exams for the Ministry of Health, but she wasn't able to get into the world of work because her police certificate of character said that she was still, that she had this record. She has been working and improving herself. She does volunteer work with the HIV/AIDS Commission. She's been doing surveys with the Barbados Statistical Department. She's worked doing housing and population census. And she says, "Sir, all I need is another chance to provide for my family." She went before the review board in 2022, but she was informed that given the amount of time she had spent in prison, she could not get her record expunged. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is a testimony of an individual who has, as we say, gone through the hornpipe. But she's never allowed her challenges to weaken her resolve. And despite the shame that she must no doubt feel and the embarrassment, she has held her head high, sat in classroom after classroom, and improved her personal circumstances. But because of the amount of time that she'd been imprisoned, she is unable to have her record expunged. Now, you see, sir, she came out of prison after 5 years, but that was only in 2022. And the law requires that she have 10 years of rehabilitation period. So she could not be eligible for rehabilitation until 2032. But in fact, Mr. Speaker, the last 10 years of her life was an exercise in penance, seeking forgiveness, and rehabilitation. Her rehabilitation did not start the day she came out of prison. Her rehabilitation probably started the day she first walked through the prison door. But the way our act is structured, she will have to wait 10 years before she could make an application to the system. And in those 10 years, Mr. Speaker, so many things can pass her by. She can be left out of so many opportunities simply because of the rigid application of a numerical standard. Mr. Speaker, there have been numerous people who have applied for rehabilitation. They've applied for expungement. I remember canvassing in Silver Hill, and I met a young man who had spent about 11 years in prison on a murder charge. And from interacting with him, I could tell that he had turned his life around. The fact that he was out and had served time would tell you that while he had been charged for murder, he may have pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but whatever it is, he only served 10 years. I remember being so impressed with this young man and the kindliness that he demonstrated to the elderly in his community, the caring nature that he had with the young people in his community, and the efforts that he made to try to keep young men from falling into the same trap that he fell into. And he asked me, what could be done? Unfortunately, sir, again, because we have a rigid application of rules, we are unable to reward a person who was probably more diligent than most in seeking rehabilitation than some of those who just sit back and count the days or the years until the time passes. That's why, Mr. Speaker, as lawyers, you only understand the importance of something called equity. It developed as a legal principle to soften the harshness of the strict application of the law. And we come to Parliament today to say that in 2025, we need to relook the whole question of rehabilitation of offenders and relook the role of the state in terms of smoothing out some of the rough roads that these individuals have ahead of them. Mr. Speaker, I talked about the ways in which we have, as a government, as an administration, tried to make lives of Barbadians easy. And I remember, and I know that you do too, there was a time when the only place somebody who was charged with an offense or convicted of an offense could get a job was in public works or waterworks. But because they had a criminal record, they had to be treated as casual workers. So the only place you could find an opportunity was within the bosom of government, but even then, the way in which we treated you, the way in which the public service treated you, was to make sure that we let you in, but you know your place. You gotta stand down there. You can't get any further than that. And you are a casual worker, and we could send you home at a moment's notice. You dare not push him out and say anything to anybody. Mr. Speaker, I had the great privilege of traveling to Chicago only a few months ago with my colleague minister who is responsible for elder affairs and who now has a peace program. We sat in a room across from a gentleman who was introduced to us as being Dr. So-and-so. And he was the most erudite of black men. Dr. So-and-so. He was a lecturer at a university in Chicago. In the course of our discussion with him, he revealed to us that he was convicted of murder and had served 15 years in prison. He wasn't convicted when he had his doctorate. He was convicted when he was a thug on the streets who had no interest in education. But we sat across from him, and alongside of him was another guy who was a pastor and who had a master's, and who said to us that he was imprisoned for 12 years because he had shot several people. And he himself had received several shots. If there was any doubt at all about man's capacity to be reformed, Mr. Speaker, we left Chicago seeing it from a completely different light. But this is not a story about our trip. It is a story about this government's need to approach our criminal justice system in a way that adds another dimension. Every day, Mr. Speaker, the public of Barbados, and quite rightly, cry out for harsher penalties. And as a government, we are not only listening to the voice of the people, also known as the voice of God, depending. I sometimes wonder if the voice... I sometimes wonder if the voice of the people is really the voice of God, but that's a different discussion. I can see the chaplain. I can see the chaplain wonders the same thing I wonder. But the voice of the people says that the way in which to grapple with the problem of crime in Barbados is harsher penalties, lick and lock up, down with, all those kind of things. And I don't want us to get into a long discourse because I'm sending this bill straight to committee. And I won't take advantage of the speaker by ranging far and wide in a situation where the chamber then doesn't have an opportunity to respond or to discuss. But the fact is that while on one hand, we propose and we accept that in some instances, the law must be firm and the penalties must be swift and hard, we also have to answer to that side of our humanity which says that we have to have a capacity for forgiveness where forgiveness is appropriate. The state as an entity doesn't have an opportunity to forgive anybody. That's not how a state works. But we do have an opportunity to give people a second chance by passing laws that allow for that second chance. Mr. Speaker, I have a few stats that I can share with the chamber, looking at the statistics over the last 3-4 years. And those statistics show that since mid-2021 to now, there have been 246 applications for expungement. 136 were approved. 73 were deferred because the individuals did not have full documentation and so on. In that period, only 22 were denied. So you had 246 applied for in that 3.5-year period, 136 granted, 73 deferred, so those individuals, when they get the paperwork correct, they can come back. and of them, only 22 were denied. I am hopeful that the 73 will get their stuff sorted out, but that 136, those 136 people who were able to get their records expunged are individuals who can walk into a place today and say, this is me, I am able and willing to work. This is me, I deserve another opportunity. We all, as members of parliament, all of us, see constituents every day, and they say, the only thing standing in the way of me getting an opportunity to work on a cruise ship or getting an opportunity to work in this place or the next place, the only thing, or even getting a visa, the only thing is this criminal record that they have, because the police certificate of character says so-and-so has a charge. Now, Mr. Speaker, as a government, when we passed the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act, and perhaps I should use this opportunity to remind the country of what we did not decriminalize the use or possession of marijuana. That is being talked about all the time, saying, oh, the Barbados Labour Party administration legalized weed. We did no such thing. What we said was that instead of tying up the court system with thousands of cases of individuals who had one joint on them or two joints, we put a ticketing system in place. Because what was happening is that a lot of these minor drug offenses where the individual had a trifling amount of marijuana were creating a disproportionate burden on the police resources, because John Brown, who had one joint, requires as much of the policeman's time and effort as the fellow who got 10 kilograms. Because he got to get tested, he has to provide his statements, he has to do all these things, he has to go to court, and he has to prosecute. So we were tying up thousands of dollars in time and energy over a joint of marijuana that probably cost, what, I don't know, $5? It made no sense. And therefore, we established a ticketing system, recognizing that it made good sense, rather than A, criminalizing somebody, B, rather than using all the state's resources to deal with a trifling matter or to deal with a trifling amount of the drug, it made more sense to give that person a ticket and say, go and pay this fine. Go and pay the fine. We're doing the same thing, we're planning on doing the same thing in relation to traffic offenses. I'm sure everybody here travels and they know that on the odd occasion that they drive in the United States and accidentally break a traffic law, the money ain't calling the police to come and arrest you and drag you before the court. You get a ticket. And you're gonna pay. It is almost as humiliating, really, as if you had to go to court. It happens every day when you park in the wrong place. We don't tie up judicial time. You get a ticket. But to bring this home to the subject matter of rehabilitation, in that legislation, we inserted a clause which said, anyone that has been charged and convicted, anyone who's been convicted with possession of anything under 14 grams of cannabis, that criminal record is automatically expunged. Automatically expunged. Again, it was a question of balancing the interests of the society. Do we really want to create a problem for a youngster or no man who, whether we like it or not, was caught and convicted of possession of 2 joints, and forever finding himself in a position that he can't make a way in life anymore? We said all those criminal records are automatically expunged. Because we understood too that it would clog up the system if all these individuals showed up and started to apply for expungements as well. One of the solemn responsibilities of a state is to make the lives of citizens easier when we can. Let me make it clear. It isn't that we are to ease up on the citizen. It isn't that we are to ease up on criminality. It is that we have a responsibility to make the lives of our citizens easier when we can. So, to recap then the efforts of this administration in the area of rehabilitation. We passed the law in '97, which allowed for you to get your record expunged. But before that, early in the '94 to '99 term, we removed the classification of casual workers and gave all those people who were working at public works, criminal record or not, security of tenure. They were working. And then in '99, we said that the rules were still too rigid and that we had to create a broader scope for individuals to have the expungements done. Now, sir, the fact is, though, that we still have some things that we have to do, and that is why we're here. And part of this exercise has been to look to see what other countries in the Caribbean have and how they approach the matter of expungement of records, to see if we can have some lessons, if we can learn some lessons from how they approach it. In the Cayman Islands, for example, they have a regime, and they say anything less than 5 years is automatically expunged after 3 years. So that's a significant difference, sir. It isn't that after the period of time you have to apply. In Cayman, it says, after a crime-free period between 7 to 10 years, your record is automatically expunged. You don't have to go and apply to anybody. For an offense under 5 years or less in prison, you get an automatic expungement after 7 to 10 years. Where you are in prison for 5 years or more, you cannot get that record expunged, but that the expungement board has a discretion that if after a crime-free period of 15 years, and with other provisos, it's a little bit on the complicated side, but the point is, sir, that we looked to see what was happening in other jurisdictions to see what we could draw from. In Bahamas, their position is that any conviction can be expunged after rehabilitation of 10 years, but, well, I shouldn't say any. There are some exceptions, and those exceptions are murder, possession of dangerous drugs with intention to supply, treason, armed robbery, rape, and unlawful carnal knowledge. In Jamaica and St. Lucia, again, similar laws. In St. Lucia, though they say a term of imprisonment over 3 years, that record can never be expunged. So different territories in the region apply different rules. So what we've tried to do, Mr. Speaker, is to try to see if coming out of our sisters and brothers' experiences in this region, we can draw from their experiences and come up with some lessons. Some of those lessons, sir, point us in the direction of saying, you know, as much as we want to give a fella a chance, there are some things that we should consider to be so heinous that we really ought not to expunge the record. And Cabinet has approved the policy which says that a person convicted of any of the following criminal offenses can't get the benefit of having your record expunged. And I'll just tell you what they are. Treason, an offense under various sections of the Anti-Terrorism and Counter-Proliferation of Weapons of Mass Destruction Act. Murder, rape, an offense relating to the care and protection of children and vulnerable persons, an offense relating to pornography in which a child is a victim, and then offenses under the Firearms Act. So let me just recapitulate, sir. The policy position that was approved by Cabinet and which is contained in this bill is as follows. Notwithstanding that we want to liberalize in many respects the expungement of an individual's criminal records, there are some offenses that we consider to be so heinous, so detrimental to our society, that are so detrimental to the lives of our populace that we will not expunge those records. Treason, terrorism, murder, rape, an offense relating to care and protection of children and vulnerable persons, an offense relating to pornography where a child is involved, and the serious offenses under the Firearms Act. Those are the limitations that we want to propose, sir. But we want to say as well, and we say in this bill, that where a person whose convictions are already expunged, you can't come back again. So if the state provides a mechanism for you to have your records expunged, and you go and trespass once more into the realm of criminal activity, you can't come back again. The nature of rehabilitation is that we can't objectively prove that you've been rehabilitated. There's no blood test for rehabilitation. There's no written test to show that you've been rehabilitated. The best we can do is say, if you do not run afoul of the law for a certain period of time, then we will take it that you are rehabilitated. But if you then go and commit more offenses, then we have to say that you cannot expect the generosity of the state to extend to another set of offenses such that we would grant you another opportunity for expungement. Mr. Speaker, I believe that that is a reasonable stance to take. In relation to the application of the rehabilitation period, this is what this bill provides. That a non-custodial sentence, the rehabilitation period is 1 year. And I repeat, you just have to wait a year, and then you can apply to have the record expunged. For a sentence not exceeding 1 year, the rehabilitation period is, as before, 3 years. For between 1 year and 5 years, between 1 year and 3 years, the rehabilitation period is 5 years, so we're not changing that. Between 3 years and 7, the rehabilitation period is 10 years. We're not changing that. But this is where we begin to step into new territory. Where you have a sentence of imprisonment for a term exceeding 7 years, Mr. Speaker, we're saying that no matter how long you are in prison for, you could be in prison for 8 years, you could be in prison for 80 years. We are not concerned. But we are prepared to say that once you have served that term of imprisonment, no matter how long, once a period of 15 years passes, we will consider you eligible for expungement. Now, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing that this bill be sent to the Select Committee on Governance. Pedro? It's governance? Yeah, governance and social policy. The Select Committee that deals with policy matters. We're sending a lot of work their way. But the reason we're sending it is because we recognize that the voice of this Parliament has to be capable of engaging in a sensible dialogue with our citizens. And every time people say that this administration does not consult, I wonder how they reach that position. Because we consult at all times. I sent a bill dealing with amendments to the Evidence Act to the Bar Association only last Thursday and said to them, give me your views. Every time we have major legislation coming out of my ministry, at least, I make it a point of sending it to the stakeholders. And I know that happens across the entire panoply of ministerial portfolios. We are constantly engaging with our constituents in that way. But they get a second bite at the cherry, so to speak, because we are prepared to send these bills to select committee so that we can now have an element of public consultation that broadens out the ability of the public to weigh in and speak and to have their concerns noted. So this bill is going to select committee for exactly that. And what are the hallmarks of those select committee hearings, sir? One, they're public. Under the last administration, select committee hearings were not publicized. Public Accounts Committee hearings were held in camera because there was an attitude that the public should not know what we're talking about. We have changed that. We've changed that. I well remember the opposition voted against having the Public Accounts Committee hearings transmitted live. We wanted it transmitted live because we felt the public had an interest in knowing. And while it's a different thing to the select committee, the point is that the public has an opportunity to hear. The public has an opportunity as well to appear and to make their representations known. And while Cabinet has accepted the policy position advanced by the Attorney General's office, advanced by me as the Attorney General, sir, we are prepared, and I intend to be at every single one of those meetings because it is important for us all to get the feedback of the public so that we can understand where they stand on this. Because this affects them too. It affects them in two ways, Mr. Speaker. It affects them because the individuals who are subject to these rules come from in our communities. They're our brothers and our sisters. But they also have to go back to those communities and live and work and try to find opportunities. And we therefore feel that sending it to select committee so we can get the feeling, the pulse of the people on this is important. Because the voice of the victim is also important. That's right. The voice of the victim. Because every time we expunge a criminal record, and that's one of the reasons why we've said, you know, as broad as we want this to be, there's some offenses that we feel you have to bear the stain of. You have to bear the stain of. And you go and rape somebody, you got to bear the stain of that. If you engage in child pornography, you got to bear the stain of that. And firearms, sir? Firearms, illegal firearms, are the scourge of our existence. They are the scourge of our existence. We have police officers working night and day, 24/7, so much so that we even had to bring in support from the OECS over the last weekend to help to shore up our security services because we knew that our officers could not let up. They could not afford to be diverted into doing certain duties to support the Independence Weekend activities. They're working really hard. But it is the firearms, sir. We had a shooting last night. We had a shooting the day before. These things are the scourge of our existence, sir. And I have no difficulty defending a position taken by Cabinet that says, if you are found guilty of a firearm offense, we're not expunging your record. And I understand that people will say, but it ain't fair, because they can rehabilitate too. But you know what? As deep as our heart is, we have to send a message. We have to send a message to those individuals who feel that they can take up guns and shoot at people, terrorize our communities. People who believe that they can traffic in firearms. People who believe that they can possess illegally hundreds of rounds of ammunition to supply and illegal gun trade, we need to tell you that our capacity for forgiveness does not run that far. Does not run that far. And so while we're standing here and saying we want people to benefit from rehabilitation, there are some things that we consider this society will not abide. And the possession of firearms, troubling children, unfairing the elderly, there are some things that we simply will not stand for. We simply will not stand for. But, sir, we represent in this chamber 30 constituencies. We represent 100,000+ voters. And therefore, we have to accept that we give them the opportunity to weigh in on these things, because we do not represent the fount of all knowledge and the fount of all understanding. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that the Select Committee will be able to engage. I know this is December and Christmas time takes up a lot of our attention, but I hope that we'll be able to engage quickly with the individuals in Parliament to weigh in on this important subject, so that we can go back to the country and say we have new rules for the expungement of records. Mr. Speaker, almost every time I stand up in this chamber, it is almost always to pass a law criminalizing something. It is. Whenever I move a bill, you can almost always be assured that in 90% of the cases, it is a bill criminalizing something, hardening some penalties, making the lives of the criminal element in Barbados harder. I am honored, though, to have the opportunity to come to this Parliament on the other side of the coin, that there are young men and women and old men and women who have paid their debt to society. And that's where that's the essence of what this revolves around. Having paid your debts to society, should you continue to operate under cloud? And I think that our sense of humanity will tell us, sir, that if you've paid your debt to humanity, you ought to have, insofar as is possible, a slate that is clean, because you will have, in paying your debt, purged yourself of your criminal activity. And we want to carry that, into a meaningful state of affairs in our country. Mindful that there are some things that we will not abide. Mr. Speaker, as I said, this will go to Select Committee. I look forward to being part and parcel of those discussions. I hope that we will get the benefit of the contributions from the members of the public, both those who have been victim of the criminal element because they have a voice and they need to be heard to say, you're going too easy on them, on the criminals, and the others who view things from a different side and say that we ought to operate with the milk of human kindness. All views must contend, and the Select Committee is where those views will best be heard. Mr. Speaker, I therefore propose, in asking that this bill be read a second time, that this bill go immediately to Select Committee, and that committee report back to Parliament at the earliest opportunity. I don't need to.
Postpone.
I therefore move, Mr. Speaker, that this bill be read a second time and that it be sent directly to the relevant Select Committee for Governance and Policy Select Committee for further consideration.
Question is that this bill be read a second time and be sent to a Select Committee for further consideration. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With those few words from the honorable member, that concludes the sitting for this morning. And I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until next Tuesday, the 9th of December at 10 a.m.
Question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 9th day of December 2025 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 9th day of December 2025 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.